Good evening, everybody. Deacon Tim Wyman here from the Cathedral of Christ the King live streaming network. It's 9 o'clock, and as promised, we are here to start talking about the Lenten mission. It's coming up next Sunday, a week from this Sunday. We begin the mission, and as I was thinking about how we lead into that, I thought, what a great way to get started by introducing our three men in black for the year. And so I thought about it and said, let's use our live streaming capabilities and just spend a few minutes with each of our three priests over the next 3 nights. And it worked out schedule-wise that we could have them all here. So tonight, I'm really excited to have Father Rob Adams. And we're doing things a little bit out of order. Father Rob is going to be closing out the mission on Tuesday night. So again, that's a week from this coming Tuesday. But was based on schedules. He's able to be here with us. So welcome, Father Rob.
Hi, Deacon Tim. Thank you so much. I am super excited to get to say hi to everybody. I know a lot of folks from Lexington. I actually got to spend a summer at the cathedral, but that's really a short amount of time in the bigger span of things. So it's good to officially get to say hi.
Yeah, definitely. And you've been out of the town for quite a bit in your assignment. And where are you assigned at this point?
I'm the pastor of St. Francis in Pikeville, Kentucky. So yeah, about as far away from Lexington as you can physically get.
Right. Great. So just to kick this off, so we're having the Lenten mission starting a week from Sunday night at 7 o'clock. And as I said, Father Rob will be closing us out on the third night of the mission. So Father Rob, if you could maybe just start off and kind of tell everybody, who are you? Where'd you come from? What's your family life like early on? And get us started here.
Yeah, for sure. So I am actually a Lexington native. I grew up in Lexington. I went to Mary Queen. I was a student in K through 8th grade at Mary Queen School. We would go to the cathedral for the mega mass. I still remember Bishop Williams hitting Father Lin Win with his staff, and that made me really happy as a 4th grader. It was awesome. But yeah, so I grew up in Lexington. I was, like I said, a student at Mary Queen, but then after that, I didn't follow the normal route. So after I really started getting into my faith and started trying to figure some stuff out about God and where he was calling me, I decided to actually be homeschooled after I finished school at Mary Queen. And I did 4 years of homeschool, and I did some cool little co-op thingies with some evangelical groups in town. But from there, I actually went into seminary right out of high school. So I was
wow.
Yeah.
That's the way it used to be, right?
Well, I'm there's definitely pluses and minuses to both arrangements.
Sure. Yeah.
But when you're ready and you don't really have anything to lose, it's a good gamble to take. And I'm glad I did.
So as you're growing up, it sounds like you had this sort of awakening to faith maybe a little bit earlier than most people do. Is that in grade school? How did that come about? What was that about?
It's kind of funny because when I was in Mary Queen, I was not known for being the good kid. I had great grades. I had really good grades. Like it was, right. I didn't realize how good my grades were until I was an adult, and I was like, wow, I was a weirdo. But no, so I actually founded the Communist Party when I was in middle school in our school, and we had like little red flags that we had at our desks. I got in trouble all of the time, right? All of the time. I don't know that I would have expressed this at the time, but maybe the way I would say it as an adult was like, I grew up with kind of I don't want to say loosey-goosey, not in the sense of my family, but like it was just the culture in Lexington. It was kind of this like loosey-goosey approach to faith. Church was about all are welcome and fine, but I didn't really see a lot of meat there. And my thought was, I remember going to mass at school and they would say like, well, what's the gospel about? And it all kind of boiled down to like, feed the poor and have values and be a good citizen and stuff like that. And I just remembered thinking, well, can't we do that another way? Do we have to have all this church? Do we have to have all this expensive money and time and really, really hard moral demands when we could just have a government that does that stuff? Like we could have a political system that makes people right. And the thing that really changed my mind actually was I met one of our seminarians at the time, and I was an altar server at church because it was way more fun than sitting in the pews. Way, way more fun. And I met this seminarian and I thought he was going to be a Jesus freak. just like real Jesus-y guy, like into the, have like the little
Right.
ichthus tattoo, that kind of.
He's stereotypical.
Yeah. Like he was a younger guy, but I remember as I was talking to him, he liked the same video games I did. We watched the same cartoons. He was kind of nerdy like I was. And I just remember thinking, it didn't hit me at the time, but as I was sort of, as teenagers, you have to process things over time. And I was like, that guy seemed fulfilled and happy. And he does all of the stuff I do, which means I could have what he has. I could have that.
Right.
And that just kind of got the ball rolling of like, well, what's this God thing really about? What's being Catholic really about? And I remember as I got better at altar serve, I remember he used to get after me for sloppy stuff. And I'm sure Deacon Tim, you probably have a number of bugaboos that are on your list. But one of the things that they had us do was we had to like fold up the corporal. It's the little tic-tac-toe board cloth. And I remember I was just kind of folding it up, and the seminarian was like, Rob, the reason we fold that is because we believe that those little crumbs from the hosts are actually Jesus. So it's not about being rules. We do this because there's a method to our madness.
Right. Yeah, which is true about our whole faith, right? That's great.
Exactly.
So you go to homeschooling through high school and discern. Obviously, during those 4 years, you were heavily in discernment, and I assume at least at the end of that, made the decision to go to seminary. So tell us about those years of the actual preparation, formation as a priest.
Yeah, so I was sent to St. John Vianney in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a lot smaller now, but back in the early 2010s, late 2000s, it was the biggest college seminary in the country. It was definitely a difficult experience, and I say that because I know there's a tendency to tell these vocation stories like, I met Jesus and then I found my vocation and it was amazing. I thought seminary was really hard, and not for the reason that a lot of people do. I was living a Catholic life, like a super Catholic life. I was almost pathologically Catholic. And I was sort of looking at seminary as a way to make myself more mainstream, right? Have the church form that into a more cohesive machine. And instead, the mechanism in seminary was like assuming that you're not living the Catholic life. A lot of whip cracking. I mean, so I don't mean this to scare anybody, but I remember they used to drag us out of our beds at 4 a.m. and make us do forced marches. It was borderline fascist type stuff.
Right.
I remember I told Bishop Gaynor about it, and his jaw about dropped. And I was like, yeah, well, that's how it was.
Right.
But it was formative, and I know that God was working behind the scenes there. Sure. I loved philosophy. So when you enter that young, you do 4 years of philosophy first so that you can learn how to think.
Right.
And I got really good at that. I got really good at learning how to think and learning how to think very clearly. So then after you finish college seminary, if the seminary thinks you're a good candidate, and if the diocese thinks you're a good candidate, you get sent on to what's called major seminary. And this is what most people have in mind when they say seminary. Right. So Bishop Gaynor decided to send me to the Pontifical North American College in Rome, where Father David went.
Right.
I was there 3 years before Father David showed up. So
was there any overlap, like a year or
a couple of years? Yeah, a couple of years overlap between the two of us.
Yeah.
I remember I made
stories to share.
Well, yeah, my favorite was one time Father David wanted to go on a trip. And, it used to be that airplanes were really cheap in Europe, like going from country to country. Now that's not true.
Right.
But he wanted to go to Germany really bad. And I didn't have the heart to say no. So I remember we went on this trip to Germany, and the trip was fine. Father David insisted that he was going to drive, and like the car stalled out because it was a manual transmission, and we're on like the Autobahn. It was a good time, right? Yeah. But the scary thing was when we went to the hotel, they took my passport and they make a photocopy of it, but I had a visa that was like stapled in because I just renewed what's like a green card in Italy. While we were flying back, I realized they had taken my receipt that I needed to prove that I had renewed my green card. And normally this isn't a problem because Europe is all one system.
Right.
So
Right.
whatever. But Donald Trump was in Italy at that particular moment, and they revoked Italy's European status because the president was there. So as I landed, I was praying to God that I wouldn't get stopped at the border with my
Right.
expired immigration credentials. But then I thought, if I get held back, David has to just go back to school. I get to go back to America. So all about it. Send me home.
Your will be done, right?
Yeah. It's all good.
But it all worked.
It did all work out.
Good, excellent. So
I was sent in Rome. One thing that's very different about like in the United States. So here, a lot of our guys would go to Meinrad, or they would go to Hales Corners up in Wisconsin.
Right.
In Rome, everybody lives at the seminary, but you go to different universities in Rome, depending on where your bishop wants you to go.
Gotcha.
So Father David went to the Gregorian, which is taught by the Jesuits.
Right.
That's because Bishop John wanted him to go there. Bishop Gaynor picked for me. So I was sent to Santa Croce with Opus Dei.
Okay.
And a lot of good theology there. My favorite was a Vatican astronomer, was one of my teachers.
Oh, wow.
And I walked down into the room and he spoke English, so I loved him for it. And we were in a basement for a final. And he goes, we are Opus Dei, and we are in a dungeon. This is where we hang the heretics. It made me feel a lot better.
Yeah. Very good. Excellent. So you come back, you're ordained, and you've been a priest for now, how long?
6 years.
6 years. So just tell me briefly, can you just kind of tell us about your experiences down in the mountains, as you say, the far reaches of the diocese?
Yeah, I would say that there are a lot of blessings, but there's also a lot of difficulties. And that's not to harm the region. I just think it's certainly not entry level. That's the way I would put it. The way I describe it is, I'll say the difficult parts and then I'll round it off with the real blessings that God works here. But the way I describe it is, learning how to be a priest is like teaching your kid how to drive, right? So when you teach your kid how to drive a car, you put them behind the wheel and you go to like the church parking lot and drive around, and you basically teach them how to operate the vehicle. And most of the driving part comes in teaching them the safety of that, right? Turn your blinker on. If you're turning right, make sure you look both ways. Stuff like that. Being sent to the mountain, being a priest, is like learning how to run a parish that functions. You don't give your child a car that really needs a lot of work, right? You give them a car that functions. So coming to the mountains, in a lot of ways, it's like being put in a part shop, and you'd say, build a car. And moreover, why aren't you in the Daytona 500? And you say, well, I'm still not really a car builder. I'm a car driver. Those are different.
Yeah. Right.
So there are a lot of difficulties in that. But I would say one of the things that's been awesome for me being out here is you learn how to do a lot of things that you wouldn't learn how to do in Lexington. Yeah, so I've learned plumbing, for instance. I had to plumb a lot of things. Yeah. The air conditioning company makes fun of me because I know well above what I should know about how HVAC systems work.
Right. Well, I mean, you're probably like a staff of one or two maybe out there. I mean,
yep.
You have you are forced into learning a lot about a lot of things. So
yeah, canon law. I had to call the diocese today and I had to figure something out about canon law because I am it.
Right.
But then again, you also move and you got to go to the nursing home because there's no sick committee. So you go to the nursing home.
Yeah.
And then you got to handle the bills because the office is closed today. So I think that part of it is awesome. Learning how to be stretched and to know when you need help and to say things like, I had one time my car broke down and I had to call a parishioner and say, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And
no, I think it's obviously brought you close to people because you would have probably done it anyway, but you were forced into it. I mean, it was God's working providential placement of you to be able to let you be amongst the people truly. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And my hatred of driving to Lexington has sort of been a blessing because I'm here a lot.
Right.
So the joke used to be that priests would come out here and it was like they said it was like being in Afghanistan. They'd do their tour and then they'd go to Lexington for 3 days and they come back here for 4.
Right.
And I don't really do that. So my friends are here, the things I do are here. So it's
Good
kind
for
of
you. Yeah.
been a good little adventure.
Excellent. Well, we start to draw this to a close. I'm so, first of all, thank you for coming up, making that travel and making the time to prepare for the Lenten mission. We're about to enter Lent. We start Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. Why do we have, what's the Lenten mission? Just why do we have them? Even not this necessarily this particular one, but just how's this Lenten mission help us to dive into the meaning behind Lent?
Yes, that's a really good question. And I'm not just saying this because I'm giving a talk. But I think there's a couple things to focus on here. The first is a real practical thing. So being in the mountains has made me infinitely more practical than I ever was before. And one of these practical things is it's good to have different people speak. It's good to have different people preach the word to you. And it's not because your pastor is bad. I love Father John. He was my favorite pastor to live with ever, right? I love Bishop John. He's a really good preacher, right? He's your real pastor of the cathedral.
And you even love Father David Wheeler.
I do. Well, I'm sure he's the one that has to work harder at loving and being nice to me. So
That's right.
I'm not going to hold that over his head. But I think it's really good to have somebody from the outside come because they shed light on the gospel and on the faith, and they don't have all of the baggage that the guys who are there all the time do. We don't fight the battles. They're not engaged in all the drama. And it's not to say that there's bad stuff. It's just part of life.
Right.
So having an outside guy is a legitimately good thing. But then more deep and theological, one of the things, and I'm going to focus on this a lot in my talk, I think we forget about Lent as a journey through the desert. Lent is a journey to go through the desert like the Israelites did for 40 years to reach the promised land. A lot of times we think about Lent as just like a spiritual diet,
Right.
I got to make up for all the sins I do the rest of the time because the church said I got to do that one time of the year.
Right.
But we don't see it as a learning how to live in paradise, right? I love C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. And if you don't know that story, it's the idea that what if everybody in hell could take a field trip to heaven and decide if they wanted to stay? The souls of the damned in heaven, they can't walk on the grass. It's too sharp. It's too real for them. And so they have to, if they want to stay, they have to learn to get poked. They have to learn to get solid. And that's what Lent is, right? If we want to live the life of Easter, which is not just a day, it's a real Christian thing. This is the goal, the resurrection. If we want to live that now, and the church teaches that we do live that now by grace, we have to go through the desert. We have to learn to walk on that grass. And I think talks like this or events like this, right? Not just my talk, but these moments of intense preparation, they help us get on track to make that journey. If you read the Exodus, there's these highlights that talk about the waypoints in the desert. They get to Mount Sinai, right? They get to Meribah and Massa. They get to the place where Miriam dies. All of these places are intense moments where God builds up his people to get them through the journey. And I see a Lenten mission, especially at our diocese cathedral parish, as a moment where, as a diocese, and particularly as a cathedral parish, we can all start focusing on the things we need to make our journey to the resurrection.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Well, Father Rob, thank you so much for taking some time on your Friday evening to be with us. And I know whoever's watching has benefited just to get to know who you are before you get here next week or a week and a few days. So we're looking forward. So I'm just going to put up a couple things here to wrap up with everybody and just kind of share about the mission itself. So again, for those of you that have not seen it or aren't aware, our mission gets started next Sunday evening at 7 o'clock. Every night it'll be 7 o'clock to around 9 o'clock, give or take. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And the focus of the mission is on the kerygma, the ardent proclamation of the good news. And what does that mean? Like we hear that term, the good news. Well, what is it? And why is it so critical to who we are as Catholics and truly our mission to the world, to really bring the world to Christ? So That's the whole intent of the mission over the 3 nights. So a couple of things, it's free. We will not be live streaming the mission this year, but we will record it for later. It'll be up on YouTube a little bit later. But if you can make it, gosh, you'll be blessed. So I would just encourage you to bring family, friends with you. And if you can't be there all 3 nights, it's okay. Come when you can. You're going to get blessed regardless. And then on the last night, we will have a light reception when Father Rob's done and he wraps us up. We'll be doing a lot of praise and worship that night. We just want to give God all the glory that we can as part of wrapping up the mission. So we'll spend a little time after that in Heman Hall with a little reception. We do have childcare for ages 0 to 5. If you have small children, we just ask you to reserve that space so we know how to plan and how many people might come. So I think that's about it. The other thing I want to mention before we close out is that tomorrow night we're going to have Father David Wheeler on at this very same time. So tune in at 9 o'clock here right on the Cathedral live stream network, and you'll get a chance to meet Father David and hear his story. And we'll just start this week before Lent, before Ash Wednesday, and really enter into Lent and everything it's intended to be for us in a great way. So we'll see everybody tomorrow night. And if you can come to the mission, please plan on being there. Father Rob, again, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Deacon Tim. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I look forward to coming and giving you the real talk that I've been working on, and I hope that it's a real blessing for you.
All right, I'm sure it will be. So have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow night at 9 o'clock with Father David Wheeler, and we'll see you then.